You're listening to Wisp Sports Radio's Nutrition Notes. Sarah Gross is talking to record-breaking yachtswoman Dee Kafari about diet and nutrition for offshore sailors.
Dee has sailed around the world twice solo, and one time was the right direction and the other time was the wrong direction. Dee, what is the wrong direction?
Women drivers. No, it wasn't a case of getting it wrong. I actually went, what's considered the wrong way round is west about round the world, which is against the prevailing winds and currents. So if you were to stop and have a rest, you'd actually go backwards, which is a little bit demoralizing, I have to tell you.
Oh, I'll bet. So you have to keep moving. And does that take longer than the right way around?
You would be surprised how much longer. Because you're going into the wind, you basically zigzag your way. So you probably increase your distance threefold compared to the conventional way around the world. And it took me 178 days, so 6 months on my own. Whereas in contrast, the right way round just took just over 3 months.
So you are the right person to ask this question to, because I was wondering for nutrition notes what people eat when they're out on the open ocean on their own for a really long time.
Well, it's really interesting because you have to consider so many things. On a race boat, you don't have any refrigeration or particularly good cooking facilities. You basically carry a jet boil. It's like camping, but on the ocean. And you have to take all your supplies with you. You don't have the ability to be resupplied because then you're out of the race. So you have to think how long it's going to take you and take everything you need to fulfill your fuel, hydration, and everything you can think of. So we have the ability to make fresh water from the salt water around us with a water maker. And so everything is basically freeze dried, where our total sum of cooking is boil some water, add it to a bag, and just like magic in 10 minutes, you get a really nutritious meal, or at least that's the plan. But also you have to consider the different climate you're in. You start in the cold in the northern hemisphere. You generally then go to the tropics and cross the equator where it's very, very hot. So you have to consider the excess sweating that you're going to do, and you have to think about your fluid intake and your salts and hydration. You then head back down to the south and into the Southern Ocean where it's extremely cold, but you're still working very hard because the conditions are pretty tough. So just by keeping yourself warm without doing any physical activity, you're using a lot of calories. So you really have to think of your calorie intake as it changes as you move around the world. It takes a little bit of planning.
So interesting. Let's start with your first point there about the fluid that can turn salt water into regular water. How does that work?
So we have a water maker that takes the salt water from the ocean, puts it under extremely high pressure, takes all the salt out of it and produces fresh water that we can then drink and use for cooking. And obviously it's quite a precious commodity. You don't carry lots because it's very heavy, but you make it as you need it with a little bit spare. But obviously you need your water makers to work for you to be able to feed yourself and drink. Hydration is always the most important thing to consider, followed by food, because obviously hydration will be the one thing that would stop you much quicker than anything else.
And so whenever there's hydration, there's also an aspect of electrolytes and salts. Where does that come into play?
So that's a real personal thing. And I think everybody becomes very aware of it when you're in the tropics, because even without doing any physical activity, you're perspiring. And then when you start doing a sail change or maneuvers on your own, there really is nowhere to hide from the sun in the tropics on a boat. And when you're down below trying to hide from the sun, it's like just baking in a carbon oven. So it really is quite hard to control your fluid levels. And you have to be aware of the salts. Kind of thinking that most offshore sailors have is in 3 litres of fluid consumed, 1 litre should be an electrolyte or a salt solution. So there's a lot of products out there now that don't contain extra sugars. So you can kind of consume them without any fear of it affecting your calories or your kind of health in any other way. So the last round the world with Team SCA on the Volvo, we were looked after by Noon, which come in a variety of flavours. And of course, everyone's got their favourite. But it's just bearing in mind that I need to consume on average 3 litres of water a day. And one of those litres should be with an electrolyte. It tends to be about organising yourself. I guess it's similar for you in the Ironman. You've got to match up your hydration with your electrolytes.
Right. I was just going to say, I think our worlds just overlapped with Noon. Who would have thought?
We're closer than you think.
So next question is about the freeze-dried food. That does not sound very tasty.
Well, you would be amazed at what you can get freeze-dried these days. There's quite a few companies that do it now, and everyone says, oh, is it like space food? And it is. It's the same kind of concept. But there's companies out there now that have taken real food and actually then just dehydrated it. So actually, when you hydrate them, it's not a processed packet. It's actually really good food in there. Those ones generally take a little longer to hydrate, so you have to be very careful. The biggest risk with freeze-dried food is being in a rush to eat it and not letting it hydrate properly, and that often causes stomach cramps and real discomfort to your stomach, which isn't good when you're offshore and when you're alone. So you have to be very disciplined to make sure you leave it long enough in the packet to fully hydrate. But you can get loads and loads of different flavors. I spent a lot of time working on my favorites. You're out on the ocean for 3 to 6 months in my case. I had to make sure that I was going to enjoy my meals. The one thing that doesn't help is the texture. It's like baby food consistency all the time. So yes, you get a chicken curry or a spaghetti bolognese or a fish pie and pasta carbonara, but they generally all have a similar consistency. You lack the texture, the crunch or the juice that you get from fresh food. And anything that you eat for 3 months, you get bored of. So I was pretty bored of all my meals by the time I finished.
No kidding. So tell us, what was the best feeling when you first ate something when you got back to dry land?
Oh, well, the funniest thing is, especially when you do the Vendée Globe, which was the right way around the world for me, just a few days before you finish, they call you up and they say, oh, what meal would you like when you arrive? And you think, wow. And I got really excited. And I'd already told my team when they came out to meet me at the finish line, I really wanted to crunch a fresh apple. I wanted to have the juice of a fresh orange. I wanted to have chocolate because I didn't take any chocolate with me because they're empty calories. And I had all this list of things I wanted. And then I got this offer of what meal would you like? And I was like, oh, something that you haven't had or you couldn't have no matter what. And I was like, I'd really like a ham and mushroom pizza and a Diet Coke. I'm very simple at heart. But what was really funny is the majority of offshore sailors are French, and they were giving it I want oysters and red wine and cheese and all being very elaborate. And there I was asking for a pizza and a Diet Coke.
A pizza and a Diet Coke of all things that doesn't even have calories in it.
I know, but it's just, those like little comforts that you have at home that you just think, God, yes. I haven't had that at all.
Yes, absolutely.
What you definitely don't want is mashed potato, because that has a similar texture to everything you've just eaten for 3 months.
It's really hard to imagine, because after, an Ironman that takes about 9 hours, by the end of the day, I'm already dying for a meal. So it's hard for me to really get my head around that. So kudos to you. But
there is a lot of variety out there, whether you're vegetarian or, a meat eater, or you want the variety. It's some really impressive meals. And for those that don't like just freeze-dried, they do what's called wet meals, where you just have to put the packet in some boiling water. And it's like a stew inside, but they're just that little bit heavier. So basically, if you're on a race boat, weight is paramount. You spend thousands and thousands of dollars changing things to be the lightest possible material. So the last thing you want to do is load your boat up with heavy food.
And like you said earlier, you need to change your caloric intake for the climate, for cold versus hot, or maybe for different days where you're working harder. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I probably averaged around a 4,000 calorie intake in the cold. And I could tell if I had a tough physical day, with some sail changes and some maneuvers, that I needed that little bit extra. And then equally in the tropics, if you're just sailing along and things are quite good because it's quite consistent weather and the temperature's very nice and it's easy, it's probably, you can drop those calories a little bit and you probably snack a little bit less. But the kind of highlight of your day, your little morale boost, are your snacks. So you do some really good meals. They can be some really high calorie meals, like porridge alone. Some of the porridges you can get at 800 calories in this bag of porridge. They're just such a fantastic fuel to start your day, especially in the south when it's cold and it's a really nice hot breakfast. But you eat your 3 meals, but you probably want 3 or 4 snacks to go in between those meals just to keep you going and topped up. So kind of calorie heavy foods like flapjacks and fudge. And for me, I'm a complete sweetaholic, so I have a little tendency to love Haribo. So I treated myself with some little Haribo sweets every now and again as well, just to keep the morale boost. It's just as important out on the ocean as it is at home and in your training.
I'm sure it is. And, even on a day-to-day level, I think we all use food a little bit as a reward system, or we have a nice snack that we like. And it's hard to imagine being out there so long without it. So I'm actually glad to hear that you have your sweets with you.
Yeah, I think it's really part of the planning. I mean, obviously nuts and trail mix is such a good source of supply of energy and really good for you to kind of munch on as you're going along. I just don't like nuts. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't like the taste. So I have to kind of think outside the box a little bit sometimes. But I've been doing this a while now, and texture and, the creature comforts that I know will make me feel better are definitely a winner, because by the time you get to that last week coming up the Atlantic, you're pretty bored of what you took out with you.
No doubt. Sounds like, though, the freeze-dried food has come a long way since my high school camping trips. Especially if you can get flavors like spaghetti bolognese.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some amazing makes. And I think if you mix up the brands and you do a little bit of homework and get your favorites in there. My food bags were in 10-day bags. So for 10 days, I could have anything within that bag. That was enough food for the 10 days. And that meant that I couldn't go on to bag number 2 until day 11. And you have to be quite disciplined. Otherwise, what you would do is you would eat all the good stuff and then leave yourself for the final month at sea with all the stuff that you're not really that interested in. So It's a little bit of self-control and discipline, but it does mean that you don't get into that routine where every Monday is spaghetti and every Tuesday is eggs or something like that. It's, what shall I have today and what do I feel like? And if you've had a particularly tough day with the weather, you can kind of pull your favorite out and know that you're going to feel better for it, a big pasta meal or something. And as for while I'm at home, I shall enjoy my visits to the supermarket and buying fresh produce.
I have no doubt. Dee, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience about nutrition. I've always wondered what people eat for days on end on the open oceans.
And you can find more nutrition notes in our video section on the website at wispsports.com, where you'll also find many more conversations from the world of women's sports. And you can also follow us on social media at Wisp Sports.